A massive new strategy game is headed to Game Pass. A groundbreaking action-adventure is getting some killer updates. And I've got reviews of Marvel's What If, Ryan Reynolds' latest Free Guy, and James Gunn's disaster piece, The Suicide Squad. All that and the latest and everything cool today in The Rundown. Hey, welcome to The Rundown. My name is Victor Lucas. I'm so grateful that you're joining us here in the Electric Playground. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at the Gaming Stadium. They are Canada's leader in online esports tournament facilitation. They have tournaments happening every single weekend that you do not want to miss out on. You can find out all about them at tgs.gg. Okay, today's episode is dedicated to Sneaker Size 10, who says, I enjoy the Star Wars animated more than the movies. They have better stories. And I guess that is a comment that can be disputed because some people prefer the movies to the animated stuff. But one thing that we can't really question here is that we are sure lucky to be Star Wars fans right now, aren't we? Okay, let's get started talking about The Suicide Squad. Yesterday, I snuck out to a movie theater and checked out The Suicide Squad. I wanted to wait till the weekend was over because I didn't want to go and be surrounded by too many people. And it was weird because I was in a theater with about 5 other people, and it was a huge theater, and it was pretty much empty. And I was watching one of the most explosive and chaotic and crazy and ambitious action movies I've ever seen. The Suicide Squad, whether you think of it as something that exists within the DC pantheon of films or in that universe or with characters that you know or don't know, whatever your sort of presuppositions are about the Suicide Squad, one thing about this movie that is for damn sure is that it explodes all the way through it. The chaos is palpable. Characters explode. There are bloody bits and pieces and chunks everywhere. It's an R-rated film that doesn't hold back on anything. There's nudity. There is just absolute gore. There's lots of vulgar elements. And then there are massive destructive action sequences where buildings are blowing up and toppling and falling upon each other. And I was thoroughly entertained all the way throughout this movie. I think that what James Gunn was able to do with the Suicide Squad is, of course, reinvent what transpired in the previous Suicide Squad movie, using some of the characters, like we see Jai Courtney's Captain Boomerang return, we see Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag return, of course Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is back, and we see Viola Davis return as Amanda Waller, heading up the Suicide Squad and sending out these supervillains on a mission that they have to complete or die trying, or Amanda Waller will press a button and explode their heads. And of course, we get to see a sequence where one of the Suicide Squad has the head explode. And it's shocking, and it's funny, and it's tasteless, and it's aggressive, and it's ambitious, and it's silly. But it's hard to take your eyes off of the screen, you know. And I've, heard and seen that some people are turned off a little bit by the vulgarity of the film and how far it goes. And there are some shocking elements in the movie for sure. But the movie is just so filled with entertainment, you know. Every character in the film, even if they're on screen for a very small chunk of time, has a moment, has a beat, has value to the plot and to the proceedings and the story. There is a tremendous amount of death. You know, in a film called The Suicide Squad, whether it was based on a comic or not, you would kind of accept that you're going to see a tremendous amount of carnage and death. And there is that. The movie lives up to its title, but every character has value. Every character delivers something that sort of progresses the story forward, or the camera swivels to them for at least a minute, and they have a beat that resonates, that actually makes you feel for the characters in some weird way. Whether that's Rebel Troops, headed up by Alice Braga, or it's a sequence with Ratcatcher, and she has a moment with her cute but terrifying little rodent buddies, or we see a true standoff and a respect that is aggressively earned between John Cena's character, the Peacemaker, or Bloodsport, played by Idris Elba. A standout in the picture is definitely David Dastmalchian as the Polka Dot Man, which has got to be one of the most insane concepts ever projected into a superhero experience, and I can't believe it's from the DC. I don't know any Polka Dot Man stories. I haven't read one, at least that I remember. But it's crazy that this character is in this film, but David Dastmalchian does a really good job in this performance, and you really care about him. And that's true with, sequences all the way through. But, of course, what you pay the big screen ticket price is to see the chaos and to see the big explosions and the final confrontation with a giant freaking monster that is beautifully represented. I mean, this is clearly an incredibly expensive film, and you can see a lot of the great practical effects, and the camera work is amazing. And James Gunn is always, a pretty cool tastemaker when it comes to accompanying these chaotic visuals with cool music, whether it's licensed tracks from established music artists or the symphonic score, which is great in this film. But it all is just this, melt your mind kind of escapism on a big screen. But it's weird to see it in an empty theater. There are big sort of cheer moments and chaos, butt-kicking sequences in the film where you're just like looking around like, did you see it? But there's nobody there. And that's the way I saw it. So it was weird. And because of that, I feel like I would have preferred to have watched this at home because I was alone. I didn't go with anybody. I went to steal myself away and go check this out by myself. But I would have preferred to have watched this with my wife on my big screen, but there's no option in Canada where I'm watching this stuff from. I feel like this is absolutely worth a trip to the theater safely, but it's weird if you're going to watch this in an empty theater. So at least go with somebody to kind of revel in it. But, I also appreciate that this is not going to be for everybody. It's confusing that it's tied to a previous branded entry in the DC universe, and Suicide Squad was such an awful movie. What an abysmal movie. It was so bad that David Ayer, who directed it, has disowned it. And it was terrible. And so people probably have the bitter taste of that in their mouth. Plus, the DCEU is just so freaking confusing. Plus, these are dark times, and the pandemic is, swelling again. And it's weird to see suicide in the title. And all of these characters are so kind of obscure in this wide breadth of different superhero and supervillain properties that exist out there that it may just not connect with the sort of wider audience. But this is fantastic filmmaking, and it's a crazy, entertaining movie, and everybody does a great job. I couldn't fault any performance. I loved Idris Elba's work. I think this is the best that Margot Robbie has been, and Harley Quinn actually has some really killer things to do in this movie. There's some disturbing things that happen to Harley Quinn in the middle of the film, but she responds the way that Harley Quinn would, and I think that she delivers a great performance in this, and I think you should see it. I don't think you should go to a full theater. I think you should definitely not see it alone, and if you have to wait till it comes home for you, if you're in a country where you can't watch it streaming, that's not going to be terrible, because this is definitely going to be entertaining at home, and it's going to be one that you're going to want to watch over and over again. There's lots of little bits in there. I'm going to give James Gunn's The Suicide Squad a 9 out of 10. Sega has been making a name for itself as one of the finest purveyors of strategy games, and they've got a new one that's coming up on August 17th called Humankind, and this is made by the makers of Endless Space, a company called Amplitude that specializes in 4X strategy experiences. Humankind has been compared to Sid Meier's Civilization. It employs similar kinds of visual effects and ideas. It's about building up a society, a civilization, a city, and amassing fame and fortune over time. And the way to win in the game is to be recognized as having a cultural influence that exists for millennia. Very interesting concept here that's going to employ a lot of historical figures and historical situations. And a cool thing about this game is that it's going to be available on Xbox Game Pass on PC. So it's releasing on PC and I believe on Stadia and on Mac OS. And then who knows if there's going to be a console port, but Humankind actually looks pretty cool. And if you're a PC owner out there that's got an Xbox Game Pass subscription, you could download that baby right away and start playing. All right, I've got another review for you, and this is for Marvel's What If. Now, I've been able to see the first 3 episodes of Marvel's What If, but I think just like A.C. Bradley told me when I interviewed her, each one of these episodes is kind of like a mini Marvel movie unto themselves. And so what I'm going to do is every week I'm going to review each episode. I'm not going to wait for the totality of this season like I am with The Bad Batch. I'm going to talk about each specific episode. Let's talk about the debut episode, which focuses on Haley Atwell's Peggy Carter, or as she comes to be known as in this episode, Captain Carter. And this is such a cool idea. It was liberally sprinkled throughout the promotional work for What If. You could see Captain Carter and Steve Rogers and their connection in this animated form, in little glimpses in all kinds of trailers that Marvel has released for What If. And I was really looking forward to this. I was a bit surprised that this was the first episode because it just felt like a perfect emblematic kind of take on what If can be about. And that's what I was left with when I watched this episode. Now, I've seen it 3 times, and that should give you an idea of how much I love it. I absolutely love it. Part of it is that I love Marvel's Captain America, the First Avenger. I thought that was an awesome debut for Captain America on screen in the MCU. I think that Chris Evans was perfect in the role. They just did a really nice job at emulating the look and feel of the 1940s and World War II. It had that sepia kind of glow that I just loved. And Joe Johnston, the director of that film, who also did The Rocketeer and worked on the Indiana Jones movies, has a special touch with that stuff. And so I love First Avenger. And so what Captain Carter's debut episode in What If is all about is kind of reimagining the scenario. What if Peggy Carter was the one that had to step into the machine and get injected by the super serum and become America's super soldier, and also face up to the rampant sexism that was, a part of culture back during World War II. So it's a really concerted effort to kind of square up against the bigotry and this sort of underestimation that would have been prevalent for women of all stripes back in those days, but especially in a woman with as much fire and ability as Peggy Carter has. And so she becomes a tremendous superhero in this episode, this mini movie, and it's just really fun to see her, punch Nazis in the face and go up against the Red Skull and confront all kinds of bad guys in different types of forms. And of course, the idea of the supernatural force that the Tesseract kind of unveils to the characters in this episode. But it's also really interesting to see that relationship with Steve Rogers endure and that they still have a love for each other. And the way that it's done in this episode, it's very smart. I mean, they bounce from key sequence to key sequence from a different shifted perspective of scenes that we're familiar with from the Captain America lore. And it's all pivoted to kind of looking over the shoulder of Peggy Carter and to see how she would handle these specific situations. There are also some pretty cool cameos in here as well. We have Sebastian Stan coming back as Bucky Barnes. We have Toby Jones reprising his role as Arnim Zola. We have Dominic Cooper back as Howard Stark, and Stanley Tucci is back as Dr. Abraham Erskine. It's really cool. So it echoes, thematically and the sort of visual imprint that's a part of the film, but then also audibly you can kind of really connect the dots there. Different actor, it's actually Josh Keaton playing Steve Rogers, but he does a great job. Very good, very close sound alike. I love this episode. I thought it was a great introduction to what the What If idea is going to be about, and it was just expertly handled. I love the animation. I love the music in it. I was really blown away, and that's why I've seen it 3 times, and now I've talked about it. I want to go watch it again. So I'm giving What If's debut episode, Captain Carter, a 9.5 out of 10. You don't want to miss this one. Now, in the updated classic for the current generation of consoles news, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice has got some great new enhancements for Xbox Series X and Series S owners, including ray tracing on both Series X and S. It's got up to 4K resolution. It will run now up to 120 hertz. There's better materials and particles and cool little details, and now there is a chapter select in the game as well. This is an award-winning game that kind of deals with a character struggling with some mental illness. It's incredibly well made, and it absolutely is a beautiful sounding experience, as gorgeous as the game looks. It won accolades all over the place for its really cool, mature plotting and a wonderful character. There's a sequel that's being made, and of course, Ninja Theory has become one of the studios that Microsoft has acquired as part of their Xbox family. So this news is not out of left field. It's not entirely surprising, but it is very cool. And I'll tell you what, it's been a long time since I checked out Hellblade, and I definitely want to load this puppy back up on my Xbox Series X. So that's some pretty good news for Hellblade fans out there. Now, I've got one more review, and it's for Ryan Reynolds' brand new movie called Free Guy. I was lucky enough to host an early screening of Free Guy for Friends of Electric Playground here in Vancouver, and boy, did we have a fun time at this movie. I've talked with one of the screenwriters on the film, Zach Penn, as well as his friend and a collaborator on, getting the authenticity correct, Mike Micah, who is a game maker who contributed a bunch of advice to the filmmakers. This is an awesome idea for a movie where Ryan Reynolds plays a video game character, a non-player character in the background of an open-world action-adventure who has a bit of a waking up moment and realizes that he can do more than just be a prop in the background, a character that gets shot at regularly because he's a bank teller in this virtual bank that gets robbed several times a day because that's one of the missions that players get to go on. It's very intelligently crafted, and there is absolutely an effort on the part of the filmmakers to kind of make this feel like an echo or a shadow of stuff that we would see in something like Grand Theft Auto. And what's really interesting is there's a story within the story, because we're in the video game world for big chunks of this film, but of course a lot of action is taking place off screen, and we're watching the game makers grapple with the idea that one of their characters is kind of sprung to life and has an intelligence unto themselves and is making choices that they didn't program or plan for. So there is this back and forth between the real world and the video game world where it's just utter disbelief. Ryan Reynolds can't believe that beyond the screen and beyond this sort of virtual city, there's a whole other reality that are kind of the gods of his world, and people on the outside are recognizing what a tremendous achievement this is, that an NPC has become self-aware. And so Ryan Reynolds' guy, who becomes known as the blue shirt guy, and it becomes a celebrity, sort of a virtual celebrity around the world. And so there is an interesting kind of look at the culture around gaming and how it permeates and how we talk about it and discuss it away from the screen. And then we're also lost in the game imaginings as well. There's some really cool special effects, but at the heart of it is an interesting story. It's about a simple character. Reminded me a little bit of the Lego Movie in a way. A character that's on this path kind of recognizes that the path can branch and that they have more value, and also kind of connects in a real human way with an actual player played by Jodie Comer. And it's romantic and it's well crafted with lots of cool action-packed moments in there as well. Ryan Reynolds and Jodie Comer have a really nice kind of chemistry on screen together, but then also Joe Keery, who plays Jodie Comer's pal in the real world, does some excellent work in here as well. And Taika Waititi is a scene stealer. He plays the owner of the game company that can only see dollar signs in Blue Shirt Guy and sort of exploiting that. And he concocts all kinds of crazy plans. And he has some insane, obviously improvised scenes that are just really, really fun to watch. That's what I would say bottom line for this whole movie. It's just really, really fun to watch. I definitely do think you should see this, whether you see it on the big screen or you wait till it comes home. Free Guy is an absolute treat. I had a really good time with this movie. The only thing that I would say about it is that, I talked a lot about it prior to seeing it, and, anytime video games are introduced into any film, whether that's Wreck-It Ralph or Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever, I always have preconceptions because I'm so familiar with the video game world, and I play a movie of what it's going to feel like in my head, and it wasn't exactly that, which is probably a good thing. But of course, as a gamer, I always want more game stuff, and you may feel similarly to that, but there is a lot, and there's some great surprises, and there's some great homages to game stuff that we're familiar with. But it really is a very fun time. I'm going to give Free Guy an 8.5 out of 10. All right, you guys, that's going to do it for the rundown today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for hitting that subscribe button and that follow button, for hitting that thumbs up. Thank you for hitting that little bell to be notified. We'll see you soon, and until then, play forever.